She walked into the most exclusive boutique in the city, dressed in thrift store clothes and carrying a canvas tote. The staff laughed. The stylists rolled their eyes. One even asked if she was lost. But when Elena Ruiz pointed to the store's newest luxury piece and quietly said, "That one's mine," the entire boutique froze. Even the creative director came out from the back. What happened next turned a fashion fortress into a classroom and revealed the shocking truth behind one of the industry's most iconic designs. Before we reveal how a simple woman in secondhand clothes dismantled a fashion empire with just her knowledge, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Maison Etienne didn't have a sign, just a tiny brass plate on white stone. That was the whole point. If you had to look for it, you weren't meant to be there. It sat nestled in that corner of the city where the streets are too clean and the people too polished. You know the type, where purses aren't accessories but investment portfolios, and even the air seems to cost money. Inside, the boutique gleamed under soft lights that made everything look expensive and untouchable. Not a single price tag in sight. Because, honey, if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Elena Ruiz stood on the sidewalk, taking just a breath longer than most would dare before entering. Her outfit wasn't screaming poverty, but it sure wasn't whispering wealth either. A soft charcoal cardigan with a tiny frayed edge she'd mended twice, wide-leg trousers pressed at home, and those leather flats she'd had resoled last spring. Her canvas tote, faded blue, worn soft at the handles, hung from her shoulder like a confession. She looked like someone headed for coffee with a book, not someone about to step into fashion's fortress. She pushed the door open anyway. The boutique's music seemed to stumble for a second, like the place itself was startled by her entry. The receptionist didn't even look up. Two stylists near the jewelry case traded glances that could have cut glass. It was the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. One stylist leaned toward the other with a smirk, stretching her lip gloss. "Sweetheart, if you're looking for the charity pop-up, it's 3 blocks down on Melrose." Elena just kept walking. There's something about Elena's quiet that invited people to fill it with their own assumptions. Some thought she was shy. Others, like the shop assistant now hovering by the fitting rooms, seemed to see her as some kind of adorable mistake, like a child who'd wandered into a board meeting. Another woman, dripping in labels and self-importance, stage whispered to her client, "God, you'd think people would at least try to dress the part." Elena traced her fingers across a display table, touching fabrics that cost more than her rent, but felt strangely familiar against her skin. She paused, at a rack of coats, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was reading rather than looking. "Ma'am?" She turned. The speaker was young, maybe 23, styled within an inch of her life, smiled tight as a drumhead. Her name tag read, Madison. "You're welcome to browse, of course," Madison said with manufactured sweetness. "But just so you know, most pieces here are showroom only, not really for general retail." Elena met her eyes. "I'm not here to shop," she said quietly. "I'm here for fabric." Madison blinked. "Oh, you're a..." Before she could finish labeling Elena as something dismissible, the boutique's entrance chimed. In swept a woman who seemed to part the air before her, heels like weapons, makeup like armor, surrounded by assistants who orbited her like satellites. The entire place shifted instantly. Backs straightened, smiles appeared, phones emerged. Someone whispered reverently, "That's Ava Talbot." And just like that, Elena became invisible again. But not for long. Elena stepped aside as Hurricane Ava passed by, trailing assistants and the scent of a perfume that probably cost more than Elena's monthly grocery bill. The staff practically bowed as she passed. "She's previewing the winter line," someone whispered with the awe usually reserved for religious experiences. Ava's stylist took one look at Elena and didn't even try to lower her voice. "That outfit's giving Goodwill grand finale," she snickered to another assistant. Elena didn't flinch, didn't argue, just kept moving through the space like she belonged there, which somehow made her stand out even more. She approached the seasonal display where pieces sat under spotlights like artifacts in a museum. Most customers approached with reverence. Elena studied them like she was checking a recipe. She reached toward a pleated skirt, examining the drape. Madison materialized beside her, sliding a manicured hand between Elena and the fabric. "We ask that customers refrain from touching without assistance," she said, voice sweet as antifreeze. Elena let her hand drop. "Understood." Madison paused, trying to decode Elena's tone. Was it meek? Sarcastic? The uncertainty seemed to irritate her. "May I help you find something more in your price range?" she added, her words sharper now. "No need," Elena replied. She moved to another display. A wool jacket caught her eye. Unusual structuring in the shoulders, double-stitched seams. She leaned in and turned the sleeve slightly to inspect the cut. That's when Julian stepped in. The boutique manager, dressed like he was auditioning for a luxury car commercial. "Is there a problem here?" he asked Madison quietly, though his eyes never left Elena. "She's been handling the pieces," Madison reported. Julian offered a smile so polished, you could see your reflection in it. "Miss, I'm sure you understand. Some of our garments are, shall we say, delicate. Many are still in development." Elena's gaze remained steady. "Which atelier constructed this piece?" Julian blinked. "Pardon?" She pointed at the jacket. "The hem technique isn't their usual. The finish is inconsistent. I was wondering who drafted it." Julian's tone hardened. "Are you in the trade?" "No," Elena said calmly. "Not anymore." An assistant nearby snorted. "Must have been with Walmart." A customer turned to stare. Phones appeared again, this time aimed at Elena. Some probably thought they were witnessing performance art. Others just smelled blood. "Look," Julian said, patience wearing thin. "I'm afraid we can't assist you unless—" But Elena had already moved on, her eyes fixed on the main display mannequin. The dress it wore was different. Deep plum silk with an asymmetrical drape, cinched high at the waist with a handcrafted knot. She walked toward it like someone approaching an old friend. "Oh, that one's not for sale," Madison called after her. "It's from our unreleased capsule. Internal design only." Elena tilted her head. Something crossed her face. Not surprise, more like recognition, maybe even disappointment. "They changed it," she murmured. "So soft you'd miss it if you weren't listening." "What?" Julian asked. "They kept the wrong seam," she said. "It was supposed to taper into the bias cut. They reversed it. The silhouette stiffens because of it." Julian's eyebrows pulled together. "I'm sorry. Who exactly are you?" Elena didn't answer right away. She stepped back, taking in the dress one last time. Then, almost as an afterthought, "That piece is mine." The room went dead quiet. Even Ava Talbot, mid-conversation across the room, turned at the shift in atmosphere. Everyone else was already staring. Julian looked like she'd just insulted his mother. "Excuse me?" Elena repeated herself without raising her voice. "That piece is mine. Or it was, before they altered it." There was a moment of heavy silence. Then, inevitably, laughter. From Madison. "Oh my God," she said, turning to another assistant. "She thinks she designed it. This is officially the best part of my day." Elena didn't react. Her eyes stayed on the dress, not with longing, but with the critical gaze of someone who knows every hidden stitch. "I drafted it by hand," she added. "But the sample team misread the transition at the waist seam. It's supposed to taper with the hip line, not oppose it. That's why the silhouette looks stiff." Julian held up a hand. "All right, that's enough. I'm asking you now, respectfully, to leave." But a voice from the back cut through the tension. Hold on. It was low, controlled, and very French. Everyone turned. Colette Marchand, creative director of Maison Etienne's North American studio, had emerged from a side door. Simple black blouse, hair pulled back tight enough to give you a headache, tablet clutched like a shield. Nothing flashy, just authority walking on 2 feet. She approached slowly, her eyes never leaving Elena. "You say this design is yours?" she asked, accent clipping the edges of her words. Elena nodded. Fall, winter 13. It was shelved. I filed it under ER-02 beta. Colette's expression didn't change, but her pace slowed. ER, she repeated. Madison leaned toward Julian. That's one of the old internal codes. Elena added, it was never meant to be sold as is. It was a concept for kinetic flow, fabric that shifts with real movement, not mannequin posture. But someone saw the sample and pushed it to finish. Colette stopped right in front of her. You were in Studio 4? Prototype side, Elena said. My desk was against the west window. I used to pin test swatches on the fire door because we didn't have proper boards. The boutique had gone completely silent. Even Ava Talbot's assistant had started filming, trying to be subtle but shaking with the tension of it all. Colette stood still for a long moment, studying Elena's face like a map. Then she turned to Julian. Get me the archive login, she said, sharply. Now, Julian hesitated. But, now. He scrambled for his phone. Colette looked back at Elena. Your full name? Elena Ruiz. The name hit Colette like a pebble in still water, just a slight ripple of recognition crossing her face. Why did you leave? Elena went quiet. I was told I didn't fit the brand, she finally said. That my ideas were too raw, not aspirational. Enough. She didn't mention her mother's illness, or the months spent in hospital waiting rooms, didn't talk about packing away sketchbooks while legal forms piled up, didn't say how she'd watched from a distance as her unreleased designs began appearing in capsule collections, with her internal codes conveniently forgotten. Those things didn't need saying anymore. Julian returned with a tablet, and Colette typed quickly, then turned the screen toward Elena. There it was, a scanned sketch of the plum dress, hand-drafted, labeled ER-02 beta, a designer's fingerprint. Colette looked back at Elena, her voice softer now. That was you. Elena nodded once. Madison cleared her throat awkwardly. Wait, so she's like, legit? Julian stepped back, suddenly unsure where to put his hands. We weren't informed. You didn't ask, Elena replied. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Colette extended her hand. Elena, she said, come with me. Elena hesitated, glancing around at the boutique, at the eyes, the whispers, the echo of mockery still hanging in the air. Then she took the hand. As the back office door closed, behind them, the boutique finally remembered to breathe. But outside that room, everyone was still processing what had just happened. Not just what was said, but who had said it. The back office was nothing like the showroom's calculated glamour. No velvet stools or gold-trimmed mirrors, just a white drafting table, fabric spools piled in the corner, and shelves stacked with sketchbooks going back years. A single dress form stood against the far wall, draped in pinned muslin, half-finished, and waiting. Elena took it all in with the familiarity of someone coming back to a childhood home. She didn't sit. Neither did Colette. You disappeared, Colette said finally. People said you'd died. Elena's mouth curved slightly. I did, career-wise. Colette crossed her arms. Why didn't you ever come forward? That design, your ER-02 beta, it was revived 3 years ago, marketed as a rediscovered internal concept. I thought it came from our European division. I saw it, Elena replied. And I recognized the changes. They flipped the grain line, added darts to force the fit. They didn't understand what I was trying to do with the silhouette. And yet you said nothing? I was tired, Elena said simply. My mother was dying. I didn't have the energy to fight for credit. And even if I had, who would have listened? I walked away. I didn't expect anything to remain. Colette said nothing. Elena looked around. Do you still use Studio 4? No, Colette said. We turned it into storage years ago. Shame. It had the best morning light. I used to sketch there until my hands cramped, Elena murmured. I'd pin scraps to the wall and just build. A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with what could have been. Colette moved behind the table and pulled out a portfolio binder. She flipped to a section marked Concept Archives, then to a subfolder labeled Disputed. Origins. I should have known, she said. We never figured out who created the cascade spine structure or the exposed bias muslin. They were ahead of their time. Too structural. But now I see it. Elena looked through the pages. Every piece had her code. Each had been absorbed into Maison Etienne's DNA, labeled as Collaborative Legacy from unnamed staff. They were mine, Elena said simply. All of them. Colette studied her. Do you still design? Not for anyone else, Elena said. But I never really stopped. I make things at home, for myself, friends. Sometimes I sketch ideas I know will never see daylight, just to keep my hands honest. You're wasted in obscurity, Elena gave a soft laugh. Obscurity has its peace, no deadlines, no politics wrapped in critiques, just fabric and form. Colette waited a beat, then, come back. To what? To the studio. As yourself this time. Elena Ruiz. Not ER. Not a ghost in the archives. Come back with your name on the door. Elena shook her head. The industry hasn't changed, Colette. It still chases names, not substance. Then help us fix that. Elena raised an eyebrow. You're serious. Colette nodded. We're building a residency program, 3 months, total creative control. No marketing teams, no trend forecasters, just craft. I've been fighting the board for years. Your appearance today might finally give me leverage. Elena was quiet for a long time. I didn't come here to be discovered, she said at last. I came for silk charmeuse, for a dress I'm making for my friend's daughter's quinceañera. That's all. And yet you left half the boutique speechless, Colette replied. Not because of your outfit, but because of your knowledge. You walked in wearing simplicity, and dismantled everything they thought they knew. A knock at the door. Julian peeked in, looking properly chastised. Sorry, but some of the stylists are asking if she's really who you said. She's more than that, Colette answered. She's who made half their training manuals possible. Julian backed away. Elena took a slow breath. I'll think about it. Colette nodded. That's all I ask. They walked out together. The boutique didn't just go quiet. It held its breath. No one spoke, no phones raised. The silence had changed from dismissive to something closer to reverent. Elena looked at the dress one more time. The mistake in the seam still bothered her, but she let it go. I'll take 3 yards of the silk charmeuse, she told Madison calmly. Madison couldn't meet her eyes as she rang it up. Colette walked her to the door. Thank you for coming. Elena stepped out into the sunlight, a slim paper bag in her hand. She hadn't come to reclaim anything. But something had been returned to her anyway, and she wasn't quite sure what to do with it yet. The story should have ended there. Elena walking out with nothing but fabric and her dignity intact. But stories like hers rarely stay neatly contained. A junior stylist uploaded a shaky 30-second clip, captioned, Thrift store woman claims she designed the new Etienne dress. Colette confirmed it? It wasn't meant to blow up. It didn't even go viral in the usual sense. But in the fashion world, among design students, workshop tailors, and the few who still cared about construction over branding, it hit like a thunderclap. By evening, industry forums were buzzing. Who is Elena Ruiz? Within a day, someone dug up her old design profile, half erased, tied to Maison Etienne codes, credited as ER, and left to gather digital dust. Colette didn't make public statements. Neither did Elena. But Maison Etienne released a carefully worded press notice. We acknowledge the work of former designer Elena Ruiz, whose archived concepts informed several recent pieces. We are working to properly attribute her contributions. Was polished, measured, deliberately vague. But it wasn't enough. Fashion blogs picked up the thread. Style editors mentioned the mystery designer who resurfaced after a decade. Photos of Elena leaving the boutique, paper bag in hand, dressed in simple clothes, circulated everywhere. And through it all, Elena stayed exactly where she'd been. In her modest apartment above a florist's shop, surrounded by dress forms, fabric rolls, and a cluttered sewing table lit by a single warm lamp. She didn't have PR people. She didn't have a manager. She had pins between her lips and chalk dust on her fingers. The calls came anyway. A podcast wanted an interview. A trade magazine asked for her design philosophy. 2 fashion houses sent feelers through mutual contacts, if she ever wants to collaborate. Elena turned them all down. I'm not chasing spotlights, she told her friend Lila, a librarian who often brought by day-old pastries. I just wanted fabric, Lila laughed. Well, turns out fabric wanted you back. The only offer Elena considered was Colette's. A design residency, not a job, not a position, but space. Space to work, to create, to breathe. She hadn't said yes, but she hadn't said no either. What touched her most weren't the offers or the press. It was the emails, quiet ones, from students, from home sewers, from women who'd been told their taste was wrong, their look too plain, their ideas too safe. One read, I watched that video 3 times. You didn't raise your voice once. You didn't have to brag. You just knew. And I cried because I've never seen someone win like that. Quietly, truthfully. Another came from a teenager in Brazil. I thought you were staff when you walked in, but you owned that room without changing your clothes. I want to learn to do that too. That, more than anything, made her pause. One afternoon, Elena walked back, into Maison Etienne, not through the front entrance this time, but the service door near the loading dock. She didn't need red carpets. She just needed time. Colette met her upstairs in what used to be Studio 4. The space was bare. The old corkboards were gone, but the light was the same, pouring across the floor in long golden rectangles. I thought, maybe you'd come see it, Colette said. Elena looked around. Still smells like steam and thread. Colette held out a plain envelope. Your residency contract. No timelines. No media. Just space. We'll give you a fabric allowance. The rest is yours. Elena took it but didn't open it. Instead, she walked to the center of the room and turned slowly, feeling the past stitched into every shadow. This time, she said softly, it's under my name. Colette nodded. It always should have been. Elena stayed for an hour that day. Didn't draft anything, didn't sew. Just stood in the light until it shifted across the floor. Then she left. Back home, she laid out the fabric she'd bought. It was already cut for a dress. Simple, sleeveless, with a natural waist and fluid hem. She would sew it by hand. No machines. Just her and the cloth, the way she'd started. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had walked into a designer boutique dressed in thrift store clothes. and walked out with a name they hadn't even known they owed her. The photo wasn't even particularly good. Elena mid-step, toed over one shoulder, paper bag tucked under her arm, face angled down, hair caught by the breeze. But there was something about it. Something real. A plainly dressed woman walking out of one of the most exclusive boutiques in the city, while inside, people were still recovering from what she'd revealed. A fashion intern posted it with, "Thrift store woman walked into Maison Etienne, schooled the staff, then walked out like it was just Tuesday. And turns out, she designed the dress." It spread faster than the video. By Morning Fashion, commentators were analyzing the clip frame by frame. Style editors called it the quietest mic drop in fashion this year. Some started calling her the ghost designer. Others simply said, Elena. No last name needed. The phrase "truth wears thrift" began trending, and for once, the attention felt genuine. This wasn't a PR stunt or an influencer meltdown. It was something that had cracked through the polished veneer of an industry built on illusion, and people were hungry for it. Former colleagues emerged, some genuinely warm, others suddenly remembering a friendship that never existed. One message read, "Elena, I always said your ideas were ahead of their time. So glad the world caught up." She didn't answer that one. But she did write back to a small-town teacher whose home ec students had watched the clip. They thought the way you stood your ground without raising your voice was cooler than any runway. That mattered. Meanwhile, Maison Etienne's PR team scrambled. They released statements about their commitment to archival integrity and deep respect for past contributors. They updated the collection credits to include Elena Ruiz, spelled out not just ER. But the moment had already moved beyond them. It wasn't about the boutique anymore. It was about the idea that someone who didn't look the part could still be the part. That talent, authenticity, and quiet confidence didn't need permission or perfect packaging. On a podcast about quiet fashion, a guest said, "We've been told for so long that the loudest voice wins." But Elena Ruiz won the room just by being right, and dressed in clothes most people wouldn't look at twice. Elena, meanwhile, went back to her work. She wasn't designing a comeback collection. She wasn't planning a brand launch. She was finishing a quinceañera dress for her friend's daughter. Lavender silk, hand-stitched sequins, a high neckline that started as a sketch on a napkin. The phone buzzed with interview requests. She ignored them all. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be good, and now the world, at least a small part of it, finally knew she was. The invitation arrived quietly. No fanfare, no press release. Just a cream-colored envelope slipped under Elena's apartment door. From the Los Angeles Institute of Craft and Design. They were hosting a panel on fashion innovation. Not trends, not brands. Innovation. And they wanted Elena Ruiz to speak. At first, she laughed. The thought of standing before a lecture hall after a decade sewing in solitude felt absurd. But the letter was handwritten. And so was the note from the department head. "Your work taught us that technique outlives branding. We'd be honored to have you." She said yes. The auditorium was modest. About 100 students, some faculty, a few reporters in the back. Elena wore a navy wrap blouse and simple black trousers. Thrifted, as always. Her opening line. "I'm not here to talk about going viral. I'm here to talk about going invisible." She spoke for 45 minutes. Not about Maison Etienne, or the seam they got wrong, or how people gasped when she named herself. She talked about pattern integrity, how good design doesn't need rhinestones to matter, how the straightest stitch can be a form of rebellion when it's done with care. They asked questions. She answered all of them. Not like a celebrity, but like a mentor. Afterward, students lined up just to thank her. Some hugged her. Some cried. 2 weeks later, Colette invited her to teach a workshop at Maison Etienne, closed door for their junior designers only. Elena agreed. This time she walked in through the front door. There was no velvet rope, no hesitant stares, just respect. The workshop was called Design Isn't a Label. They started with muslin and tracing paper. No digital templates. Just hands, minds, and mistakes. One student asked, "What should we focus on first?" Elena replied, "Listen to the fabric. It'll tell you what it wants to become." The phrase stuck. It showed up on pinned notes, Instagram bios, even graffiti outside a textile shop downtown. Colette pulled her aside after the last session. "You know," she said, "we've had more sign-ups for this than any masterclass we've ever run." "I'm not a master," Elena said. "I'm just someone who never stopped practicing." She still hadn't signed the residency contract. It sat folded on her sewing table at home, but she didn't need a title to make an impact. Then something unexpected happened. Vanity Fair ran a feature. The Ghost in the Thread, How Elena Ruiz Quietly Changed Fashion. It didn't feel exploitative. It felt earned. They showed her sketches, her old photos from Studio 4. Even a quote from her mother, from an old blog. True elegance isn't about being noticed. It's about being remembered. She didn't pose for the cover. She asked them to photograph her hands instead. 3 months. After the boutique incident, Elena returned to the school where she first spoke. Not as a guest, but as a visiting instructor. Her class filled up in hours. The room was filled with worn jeans, thrifted coats, frizzy buns, chipped nails, and brilliance. Elena stood at the front, rolled up her sleeves, and said, "Let's make something that doesn't need a logo to matter." You ever judged someone by what they were wearing? Only to realize they were someone you should have been learning from? Or maybe you've been in Elena's shoes. Underestimated, overlooked, or treated like you didn't belong, just because of how you looked. Drop a comment below. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your story. If this tale of quiet strength and earned respect resonated with you, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want more stories about ordinary, women doing extraordinary things without asking permission, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. And if you know someone who's been undervalued or written off, share this with them. Sometimes the strongest statement isn't made by shouting, it's made by being undeniable. Our other videos should be popping up right about now. Pick your next one, and I'll see you tomorrow with another story that might just change how you see the world.